everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. For myself, I'm in Seattle, Washington, so it's lunchtime. Thank you so much for having me to speak today at the .NET Conf Focus on Maui event. I'm so excited to be talking about some single project application architecture and some of the features that we have. I'm McKenna Barlow. I'm a PM on the .NET Tools team, and for my session, we're going to take a deep dive into single project and actually get to take a tour of a single project application in Visual Studio. So the flow of my talk, I'm basically just going to talk at you guys for like 5 minutes, give a little bit of an overview of what single project is, some of the stuff that we have, some of the cool new UI that we have, and then going to jump into basically a Visual Studio walkthrough. So I'm going to go through a single project application and show off some of the shared code and resources, show you where the platform-specific metadata lives, where like basically what is in the project file for these single project applications. And then I'm going to show off some of our cool new UI. So we have target selection UI, we have app metadata UI, and then if we have time at the end, we can get a question or two in. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about what makes up a Maui single project app. So what is single project? So Maui Single Project takes the platform-specific development experiences that you typically encounter while developing cross-platform apps. So stuff that you all are probably familiar with, and abstracts those experiences into a single shared project, which can then go and target whatever platforms you'd like. So iOS, macOS, Android, Windows, etc., all of those platforms all at once. And by sharing code between all of the platforms, Single Project simplifies this development experience for when you are creating those cross-platform apps. So one of the key aims of Maui here is to enable you to implement as much of your app logic and actually your UI layout as possible within this single code base. So some background, what you're probably used to. If you're coming from a Xamarin Forms background, then you know that if you wanted to have a cross-platform app, then you'd typically have like 3 or 4 projects in your solution, right? You'd have one, which is like your shared project, which has all of your shared code there. And then you'd have sort of like these bootstrapper projects for each of your platforms, right? So you would have maybe one project for Mac, one project for iOS, one project for Android, and these are all referencing your shared project. But you would have to have those separate projects for each of your platforms. And then you'd have to have for each of those projects copies of your images, resources, whatever you might need for each of those platforms. Now, with .NET Maui, we have the single project approach where we can manage all of this stuff from one spot, which is super cool. We basically have this space now for shared code, which means that we can put whatever we want into this shared code and it will apply to all the platforms. So this is kind of similar to in the Xamarin Forms world, having a project that has all of your shared code and everything, but this time it's all done from one project. So you don't have to be managing multiple projects at once, managing all of those resources and everything. So .NET Maui takes advantage of .NET's multi-targeting. So what it does is it actually uses that single project, and that one project can target multiple platforms, all the platforms that you want at once. So we can also still have the ability to add platform-specific code if necessary, and we'll see in most cases it probably will be necessary, but we can still go ahead and add those things in for individual platforms still, and it will only show up for that one platform. So before we go into Visual Studio and actually take a look at single project and poke around a little bit in one of those projects, I just wanted to point out and make clear that if you still want to have those different projects for each of the platforms, you can still totally do that. And in fact, someone can fact check me if this is out of date information, but I believe this is the case that when you're using Upgrade Assistant to upgrade from Xamarin Forms to Maui, it will still upgrade all of your project files basically in place. So you will still get all of the great Maui functionality, but it'll be in different projects. So you can still totally do that if you want to maintain separate projects for each of your platforms for whatever reason. So Maui's not forcing you into this single project paradigm per se. But it allows you to take advantage of the abstraction of multiple platforms into a single spot, which is really cool. So really everyone can do what you want to do here. You can do as you please. We're just trying to give you more options. But if you do a file, new Maui application, which is just how typically you would start a new Maui app, you are going to get that single project setup. That is the default setup. And my talk today, I'm going to be trying to convince you why you should want to have this single project setup and why it's essentially the bread and butter of .NET Maui. So I'm going to walk you through some of these cool features and the benefits that are provided to you by having all your platforms in one place. So let's hop into Visual Studio, take a tour around a single project application. All right, so I have Visual Studio pulled up here already with a Maui app already open. Maui app 10, very creatively named. First, I want to take a look at the Solution Explorer and just kind of take a tour around what we have going on here in terms of files. So first, I'll point out the Platforms folder, which is where all of our platform-specific stuff lives. And I will say everything outside of the Platforms folder, so all this other stuff, including the Resource folder and all of this stuff, is all in the shared code space. So you can see these XAML pages here in the shared space. You can create whatever pages and folders you want out here, and that will be in your shared code space. And that's all just in this one project. So if I go and create, say, like a class in here, it'll apply to all of our platforms. Or if we add a new XAML page, it will go to all of them. So this is where we want to write our shared code. Now we still do have the ability to do this platform-specific stuff, and we need to, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're making an app, say we want to target like iOS and Android, Apple and Google are not going to say, just go ahead and send us the Windows .exe file, and we're going to do all of the work to be able to translate that into something that iOS and Android can understand. They're not going to do that work for us, right? So we still ultimately have to build an IPA file for iOS, for Android, the AAB file, and then for Windows, that'll still just be our standard .exe file. But you know, for all the other platforms, we need kind of like the platform-specific binaries for this, right? So we still need some way for our metadata to actually be in there. So all that is done in the platforms folder. So let's open it up and see what we have going on. So in platforms, we can see all of the supported platforms here. So we have Android, we have iOS, Mac Catalyst, Tizen, and Windows. So under Android, for example, if we open this up, we can see the Android manifest. So that's all the metadata for our Android app. And if we go into iOS, we can see info.plist. That's where all the metadata specific to our iOS lives, right? And then in Windows, we're used to having AppX manifest. Right, so we have all of these things here and all of our files for our platform-specific metadata. And also, if you add code into one of these folders, for example, if I were to open up Android here and go and write code in my Android folder, suddenly I'm transported into Android world, right? So I can go in here and I can be using Android namespaces and call in APIs. Or for iOS, if I go in here and I'm writing code in here, all of a sudden I can use UIKit and Foundation, that kind of stuff, right? So you can still write your platform-specific code actually whenever you go into these platform-specific folders. And then you can go and do your abstraction outside the platforms folder and kind of tie it together in that way. So you don't lose any of the power that Xamarin Forms gives us, but we do have the ability to make our lives a lot easier by just having things be shared. So let's go look at the resource folder next. First, I will note, as I mentioned before, platforms folder is the only platform-specific stuff. So this is outside the platforms folder, meaning that resources live in the shared code space. So all of our resources, therefore, will be shared between all of the platforms that our application will support, which is super cool. So if we open it up, we can see all of these subfolders here. In here, we have app icon, fonts, images, which I'll touch on more in just a second. We have raw, which is basically just a generic resource folder. In here, we might have JSON files, video, text file, whatever else. In this case, we have a text file right here. Splash is for our splash screen. And then in styles, we can see our colors.xaml and styles.xaml files. These are basically template files that we provide for you that have sort of like a default style for our application, help you style it and make it look nice. So we can actually take a look in here. This is really cool, especially in a cross-platform app, because Maui apps use native controls under the hood, which means that for each platform, the app will be using the typical UI controls that you normally see for an app targeting that platform. So on an Android app, you'll have like Android buttons, for example, but on Windows, those will be Windows buttons. So what's really cool about this styles.xaml, we're able to style them exactly the same so that our apps will be practically aesthetically indistinguishable from each other across the platforms, right? So this styles file helps us manage the design of our app, makes everything look pretty, makes it look consistent across the platforms, which is essential in our cross-platform world. You can see that there's theme binding here. So this means that you can define a certain look for light theme and dark theme, and then that will be consistent across the platforms as well. So as I'm sure many of you are familiar, resource management for cross-platform app development has traditionally been pretty problematic. Each platform really has its own approach to managing resources, and then that must be implemented on each platform with whatever separate sizes and requirements there are. So for example, each platform has different image requirements that will typically involve creating multiple versions of each image at those different resolutions. You have it in each of your projects. A single image is going to have to be duplicated multiple times per platform sometimes, with those resulting images having to use different file name and folder conventions for each platform. And you just have to kind of know what those conventions are, unfortunately. This is in the past, before single project at least. So this would be to display, say you have an app that's targeting Android and iOS, and you want to display one image in your app. For iOS, I know there are 3 scale factors. For Android, there can be more, like up to 5, I think. So depending on what you want to show, that's already 8 images that you need to configure separately, have the right resolutions for, the right file name, have it in the correct place just for that one image to show up in your app. So clearly super not ideal. I don't know about you, but I do not like wasting time sitting there converting image files when I could be spending it working on my app and actually being productive. So personally, my favorite feature of single project for Maui applications is that these assets are now shared between all of the platforms. So one of the most important things I want to point out in resources here, like if we look into this image folder, is that we can see this SVG files. So SVG is definitely the preferred way to add image resources, especially in our cross-platform world. And this is because SVGs, or scalable vector graphics, they're basically images that can be scaled to infinity, which means that they can truly be made to be any resolution possible. And they're not bound to a certain number of pixels in the same way that, say, like a JPEG image would be, where if you were to blow it up really big, it might get super pixelated and ugly. So these SVGs are really, really helpful for us when we are developing cross-platform apps with different image requirements, because at build time, we can now just scale the images from our SVG into all the necessary requirements for iOS, Android, Windows, Mac Catalyst, etc., without doing any of the extra work, or honestly, even being aware of what those requirements might be. It's all handled by a single project now. So with the single project approach, how this works is that resource files are stored in a single location. You can see here where they're stored. And then from that SVG, the images of the required resolutions are generated for each platform only at build time. So not only does this save you a lot of time and stress of having to manage your own resources, but it can also drastically minimize the size of your project. So I just love how Maui handles resources. So I just had to talk about that for a minute. We just don't have to worry about any of these requirements anymore for each platform. You don't have to manually create the sizes yourself, copy in the right places, all that craziness. We will do that for you. And this is what makes single project so much more productive than before. So we're talking a lot about resources and stuff. All this stuff has to be saved somewhere. So let's hop into the project file to see what this actually looks like for a single project app. I'm going to try to show as much of this as possible. I want it to be big enough that we can see. Cool, so let's check out what's in here for single project. First, we can see target frameworks, which is just a list of the targets that you can or want to support with your app. And again, this is basically just taking advantage of .NET multi-targeting capability. So we can go ahead and edit this from the project file. For example, if we, let's say we don't want to support Android, we can just take that out, remove it from the list of target frameworks, and then now our app will not support Android, and all the Android stuff is gone. We can't use it. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to stick it back in there because I do want to support Android. But we can edit directly from the project file, or there's also UI in the project properties, which I will show in a few minutes. That makes this super easy to do. So we then can see, well, first let me point out, this app is targeting iOS, Mac Catalyst, Android, and Windows. We don't see Windows here. It's a little bit tricky. It's kind of hiding down here. We have this separate Windows target, which has this condition on it, basically saying that Windows apps can only be built on Windows machines. So it's just a little tricky little condition. That's why it's not in here, but Windows is being targeted with this app. And then we have Tizen here as well. Since this is a newer platform, not everyone is going to want to be targeting it or will have the workloads installed for it. So we have it currently commented out. Go ahead and uncomment it, and you will also be targeting Tizen. So then we can see basically some other stuff that just needs to be here. We have output type, we have root namespace, we have use Maui is set to true, which obviously we're in a Maui app, makes sense. And we can see here that single project is set to true. So this is what enables the single project approach, and which I mentioned before, you can still get Maui functionality without single project being enabled. So you can still get IntelliSense, hot reload, all the other like beautiful Maui features, but just without your app being architected in this single project way. But then you won't get the cool new single project functionality. So I definitely recommend having this set to true. That's kind of the default here. Again, if you do a Maui new application, you will get single project set to true by default. So this is the typical experience. Next, we have display name and all this app metadata here. So here we can set the display name for our app once, and then that will be added to our platform-specific metadata. So like our Android manifest, info.plist for iOS without doing any extra work. So I've very creatively named my app McKenna's Maui app. This now is going to be in all of our app metadata. So we can just put it here once, and we'll put it in the right place for you during when you start compiling for all the separate platforms. Same thing from app ID. This is basically the app ID, and here's a GUID that we need for our app to work. And then same for application display version and application version. So all of this stuff, all this metadata is basically stuff that you need for one platform or another. And we can manage this now just in one place. So we actually have some really nice UI for this in the project properties page. So let's jump over there and take a look at what that actually looks like. So if I go ahead and right click on the project, go to properties, I'm interested in Maui shared. So we have these lovely Maui shared properties, and you can see these are the same fields that we were just looking at in the CS proj file. So we have application title, app ID, display version, all the same stuff, and we can see all the same values in there. So you can edit it directly from the CS proj file, but we also now, for most of these things, have UI for it. This next little bit right here is basically, it's kind of connected to our target frameworks. We are saying for each platform, what versions do we want to be supported? So here we are able to define what the supported OS versions are here. So if we want to have a minimum version requirement or standard target, we can define that here. There's also UI for that in the project properties page, which I will show in just a minute. So let's next take a look at what all of our resources and everything that we were just talking about actually look like when we put those things into a project file. So let's take a look at this item group right here, these guys. So here we can see our item group with some of our resources and stuff. The first thing we see is Maui Icon. So this Maui icon is going to be the icon for our Maui app, and this points to our app icon.svg. So if we actually go in here, we can see exactly where it's pointing to. Then we have this foreground file, which is basically just a piece that Android needs to be able to animate correctly, and then this color. And let's note that since these are SVGs right here, that means that we can scale to whatever size icon we might need in the same way that we talked about just previously. So we are able to generate for you the app icon just from these three items right here for all platforms, just from this one line of code. So this one line of code is going to create what you see on your iPhone home screen, on your Android home screen, on your computer desktop, wherever you see the app icon. It makes it super easy to make one for all platforms at once. And it's the same with splash screen. You have background color, you have your simple splash, which again, you can see over here. And the beauty with this is that we don't have to create an activity now on Android or a storyboard on iOS. It'll all just be there for all our platforms from this one line of code, which is super, super cool. Another neat thing to notice is this notation right here. If you've looked at other CS project files, especially like Xamarin Forms ones, you were probably used to seeing lists and lists of files that have to be included here. So we've introduced in .NET MAUI this new asterisk wildcard notation. So you can just say resources/images/star, and it will add all of your images inside that folder to this Maui image as we've defined. In this case, because we need to use a Maui image type so that we can resize in the way that we've talked about. For fonts, you can see this one, it's the same way. If you don't want to worry about this notation here, you don't have to worry about it because mostly single project will be able to figure this all out for you on its own. You just drop your fonts in the resources folder and we will figure out the rest for you automatically. So you can actually see more about configuring your fonts in here in our generic host builder, configure fonts. So this is really cool. You can just manage your fonts this way as well. You just put your font file here once. You can see here we have Open Sans regular, Open Sans semi-bold, and we will figure it out for you and put it where it needs to be, right? So you can still also do the same thing for raw assets or any sort of files you might need here. Maybe you need to add some sort of database file that you want to initialize on the user's device. So you can stick it here and do it directly from your application. So we can go and say like builder.services and actually go and add whatever we want here. So we can go, oops, that was not what I wanted to do. We can go ahead and add a singleton, add transient. You can go and add, hook up some logging here or do Blazor Web View or whatever you need to do here, which is super cool. So dependency injection is now built in as well. You can just register all here. It's set up with these extension methods, so you can just basically hook into the builder here, and you'll know this pattern if you're coming from another project type. This is just a convenient way to use the builder pattern that's used across other .NET workloads. And we already have loads of third-party libraries that are hooking into this. If you're installing the .NET MAUI Community Toolkit, we have this initialization line of use Maui Community Toolkit, and then boom, it's initialized, you're ready to go. Super easy. This is just another way we've tried to make cross-platform development just so much easier for everybody. And I know we're coming up on time here, but I do want to show one more really exciting piece of UI that we have. So I'm going to take us back to the project properties. We were in Maui Shared. I want to go up to application and actually check out the target framework UI. So here we can see this user interface where we're actually able to see at a glance what targets we are targeting with this application. So if we look at our CS proj, we can see what we're targeting here. It matches up with what we see in the properties. And the cool thing here is that we can just go ahead and toggle these. So we have this toggle button where we can switch on and off whether we want to target for a specific platform. And then we can go and choose the versions. So here I can choose, like if I only want to target for iOS 15, for example, you know, or if I only want to be able to target a minimum iOS framework. So if I go ahead and uncheck one of these, for example, Android, say I don't want to target Android anymore, I can uncheck this. And if we watch the side here, Android has now disappeared from this tree. We no longer have access to those. Well, we have access to, but we can't see anymore in the UI, at least the Android specific properties. And then if we go into our CS proj, we'll now see that Android has magically disappeared from this target frameworks list. If we want it back, we can go ahead and check it back. Boom, it's back. And we'll see it back in our list. So this makes it so easy to target your applications to exactly the platforms and versions that you want. So this really is the magic of .NET MAUI single project, right? One code base, all these different operating systems and devices, Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS, all with .NET and C#. So that's pretty much it for now. Back to you, James.